A very good morning to you. It's 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I worked something out yesterday. I don't know if you were listening. I hope you were. If you weren't, I'll need a letter off your mum, obviously, by the end of morning break. But I think what we've got to do as we try to wade through the revelations or indeed the confirmations, depending on whether you were paying attention during the COVID-19 catastrophe, we can't wade through them willy-nilly, can we? We can't just sort of sit there and let it all wash over us. We've got to focus in on things that make it easier to see the bigger picture, oddly. You focus in on specifics and the bigger picture comes into better focus. So the line that struck me most in many ways in Helen McNamara's testimony yesterday was, and she, of course, was the deputy head of the civil service at the time. It's impossible to exaggerate the importance of her role. But I think the line that struck me most, actually, was not the ones that perhaps jumped out fastest, but the ones that settled hardest. And it was about him, Boris Johnson, spending a significant amount of time in the very early days, in her words, laughing at the Italians. Laughing at the Italians. I don't know if you remember, but that's when we all started panicking, wasn't it? That's when we all started thinking this is serious. And the idea that what was happening in Italy wouldn't happen here, well, it was surreal. It feels even more surreal in retrospect than it did at the time. But there was some sort of, we used the word exceptionalism a lot. I think it's when we really started digging into the word exceptionalism. And even as we said it, even as we used the word a lot, I think we probably sort of had our fingers crossed behind our back, didn't we? He can't really think that we are somehow going to be able to navigate this nastiness or even perhaps develop a nationwide immunity to it simply by dint of being British or by dint of being English. But what emerged from Helen McNamara's testimony yesterday is that I still can't believe this, you know. This often happens. I know what I'm going to talk about when the light comes on at 3 minutes after 10. But until I actually get the words out of my head and into my mouth and into your ears, the full weight of it doesn't really hit me. But he honestly believed that the ludicrous, bogus, patriotic nonsense that typified his entire life and had propelled him all the way to Downing Street, he honestly believed that this was somehow a skill set with which you could tackle a global pandemic. He would just somehow become world-beating by saying it a lot. We will be world-beating. But there was no plan in place. There was no particular sense of urgency. There was no particular interest in it. And that line keeps coming round again and again and again. He spent a significant amount of time, quotes, laughing at the Italians. So I look back on the images of intensive care wards in Italy and the calls we took from people in Italy as they desperately tried to get the lid back on, as it were. I look upon that as perhaps one of the biggest alarm bells that we've ever experienced as a country. Could you imagine how loud it would have been had it been an actual alarm bell? I don't know if you have fire practices in your office. We do. They drive me absolutely nutty. They're so noisy. It's almost like it's designed to be some form of psychological torture. But it's necessary, of course. The alarm needs to blow your ears off to be effective. So if the situation, if the images in Italy, if the tragedy, the deaths, and hospitals in Italy was an actual alarm bell, how loud would it have been? How loud would it have been? And how remarkable would it have been to see the British Prime Minister responding to it by laughing? So that, if you forced me to pick the thing that struck me most in the deputy head of the civil services testimony yesterday, it would be that. But there's no conversation there, is there? We're not exactly going to do a BBC-style balanced debate and take calls on why that's not shocking at all, and it's perfectly normal for the Prime Minister of a civilised country to be laughing at the sight of a very near both geographical and political ally suffering in unimaginable circumstances from a pandemic that is almost certainly going to arrive in the UK tomorrow. There's no debate there. It's catastrophic. In retrospect, it was catastrophic at the time, and it is eternally unforgivable. And of course, and forgive me for labouring this point, but I do think it's important, significant swathes of the broadcast, of the media industry in this country, both print and broadcast, had their heads so far up Boris Johnson's backside that they still can't tell you the truth about this. Daily Mail is trying to provide coverage of an inquiry into Boris Johnson's handling of the COVID-19 crisis without really mentioning Boris Johnson. It's an astonishing exercise of mental gymnastics that shames us all, really. But that's the thing. So, folks, just keep that in the back of your mind as today's testimony kicks in and the inquiry continues. When that alarm bell went off, what do Italians feel? What do Italians feel, knowing that our Prime Minister was laughing at your tragedy? Ollie in Oxford says, laughing at people dying in overwhelmed hospitals really is a mark of the man. And it is, isn't it? It truly is. Unbelievable. So there's no point talking about that together today because we're hardly going to disagree with each other. And if you are minded to disagree, you probably need medical help rather than a phone line into a radio station. I want to talk instead about the thing that makes me most uncomfortable as opposed to most angry or most shocked or most disgusted. And the reason why it makes me most uncomfortable is I'm almost certain that I'm on the wrong side of this phenomenon. I listened to Helen McNamara talking about a sort of toxic macho culture and talking about misogyny. And I felt a little bit like I did when I read Caroline Criado Perez's book, which contains all sorts of information about how the world is built according to men's needs. You see it in the PPE provision. So Helen McNamara wrote to Simon Stevens, the head of the NHS, simply to say, are you aware that that all of the PPE that we're getting is built to male specifications, which is a silly thing to do because 80% of nurses are actually females. And therefore, it's not good. Everything from average size through to face shape, we're providing them with the wrong PPE. And that's the sort of logistical evidence of a misogynistic society, or at least a society that prioritizes men at every turn over women. Another thing in Caroline's book is an astonishing little bit of information about crash test dummies, which are also built according to male anatomical dimensions, or were until this book came out. Incredible, really, to think that, you know, the thing they use, the dummy they use to see what would happen to a human body in the event of a road traffic accident or in the event of a car crash is a male body. So if you're a woman and therefore likely smaller or differently shaped, that they're not investigating what's going to happen to you in a car crash. And the PPE story here is the equivalent. But what I want to do is read you the email that she sent to Simon Stevens on this issue. I want you to concentrate on the language. Okay, so she said, just when you thought, hi, Simon and Mary. And remember, this is the deputy head of the civil service. And I'll tell you when I've read it why I think it's significant. Just when you thought you were out of the woods on annoying emails from me, has the PPE conversation picked up the fact that most PPE isn't designed for female bodies, and yet the overwhelming majority of people who need PPE are women? 77% of NHS staff are female, 89% of nurses, 84% of care workers. There has been quite a bit of commentary on this. To state the bleeding obvious, women's bodies are different and particularly face shape with masks. If you need more on this, let me know, but it would be reassuring to know that it is being taken into account in this new supply. I didn't know who to annoy with this, so chose you, but by all means tell me where to better direct my questions. And she ends with an emoji of a fist and writes in brackets, that's a fist bump, not a punch. Now, I would never have noticed, reading this, I would never have noticed that its apologetic tone was significant. It took a female journalist and well, quite a few female journalists actually to point out that every woman in a management structure would recognize this, because the way that it is phrased is, well, there's no better word than apologetic. Just when you thought you were out of the woods on annoying emails from me, I didn't know who to annoy with this, so chose you. She's sharing information that is hugely, hugely important. And yet the culture in Downing Street, and this is to the head of the NHS, Simon Stevens, the culture was clearly one where, and indeed the language that Dominic Cummings used to describe her was evidence of this, talking about how, and using well, probably the vilest word that the Anglo-Saxons gave us to describe Helen McNamara, and talking about her aiming stilettos at him. So she was censoring herself. She was editing herself in order not to upset men. And I have seen strong women on Twitter, journalists, some of whom I know, talking about this in a way that reminded me actually of the early days of the Me Too movement. This is, I think, like the non-criminal equivalent of the Me Too movement, where even men who think they're feminists or allies or whatever word you want to use have got absolutely no idea what that is like. And I must have witnessed it. I must have seen it happen. There's no way a man would have written a letter like that. Well, okay, I can't prove that to you, but there's no way that Dominic Cummings would have written a letter like that. Just compare the Prime Minister's most senior advisor with the Deputy Head of the Civil Service. Dominic Cummings is, well, you know that I can't say the words. Dominic Cummings is calling everybody C words, F words, W words. Think of a rude word. Dominic Cummings was using it to describe his colleagues in the Cabinet Office. And he was throwing around expletives and insults and all the rest of it like confetti at a wedding. And this woman, Helen McNamara, when pointing out hugely, hugely, hugely important things, has to adopt an almost apologetic tone. It's almost as if she's got her cap in her hand and she's ringing it, like Uriah Heep, apologising to these powerful men for disturbing their equilibrium. On the 13th of March 2020, she walked into the Prime Minister's study and said, "I have come through here to the Prime Minister's office to tell you that I think we are absolutely effed. I think this country is heading for a disaster. I think we're going to kill thousands of people." And then she outlined how Johnson's response to the early months of the COVID outbreak was typified by machismo, ignorance, and baseless confidence, which you would have to describe as weapons-grade blokishness. It's casual misogyny. It's low-level misogyny. Do you want another example of it? It happens here, doesn't it? It happens on the show. When women ring in, they quite often preface their call by apologising or by saying that they're not going to be as interesting as other callers, and they're always more interesting. How many times have I said to you, we're having a conversation today about women's life experiences, whether it is through sexual assault through to matters menstrual, and my phone lines light up with men. Bobbing Ongar will be top of the list of people waiting to talk to me about periods. And the reason I mentioned shame or embarrassment a moment ago was because I didn't notice for years. Look, the texts are coming in just like randomly. Female firefighters are wearing PPE designed for men, James. No consideration given for body shape, etc. whatsoever. James, the BMI scale is widely used to define obesity, is also based on the norms of white men. And there's a link to a Washington Post article making this point. James, I'm a tennis coach, and I notice that women spend most of my sessions saying sorry for their errors, and men never do. Caroline writes, it's called casual misogyny, James. It happens all the time. And I didn't know. Well, I knew, but I didn't know. Something about the way that Helen McNamara is trying to do good in an environment of toxic machismo has really struck me. But Dominic Cummings said he wanted to handcuff her in one of his WhatsApps. He said he was sick of dodging, and I quote, dodging stilettos from that C word. He's trying to defend himself on Twitter at the moment, claiming that he's not misogynistic because Vote Leave hired lots of young women. I mean, good God. Self-awareness is a stranger to Dominic Cummings, isn't it? But the way that he talked about her, the way that he wrote about her was deeply, deeply misogynistic. He's incredibly rude about men as well, but the language that he chooses to use for this particular woman is misogynistic, but not extraordinary. So what question cuts to the heart of this? I think it's a bit like the way that we did the hashtag #MeToo. I think it is like that the good man in your life who had absolutely no idea that you live with a constant sense of threat when you're walking anywhere, especially after dark, or that you hold your keys in your hand in a certain way, or that you have been a victim of a crime, or that you deal with inappropriate comments or behaviour so constantly that it had become a background hum of almost normalness that the men in your life actually knew nothing about. I work for a large ambulance service, James, quite high up in the management structure. I email like this on a regular basis because of misogyny. Please keep me anonymous. It's almost as if when you're drawing a man's attention to something, you have to bend the knee. Classic symptoms of heart attack, James, are different for men and women, but it's only the male signs that are put out by the NHS. Lady motorbikers struggle to get leathers and lids when I first started riding, it says Liz. It's better now, but there's a pink tax on it. We pay a little more for the gear than men would. In the workplace especially, the challenge for me here is to persuade you that what is completely normal and ordinary in your life will actually be surprising and even shocking to me. Do you see what I mean? Well, come off it. You must have noticed. You must know that this goes. I kind of don't. Until someone pointed out the tone of that letter from Helen McNamara, I don't think it would have occurred to me that it was written in a way that a man would simply never adopt. So in your workplace or elsewhere, what would you use to illustrate this problem of constant low-level misogyny? And by low level, I mean you're not being shouted at. They're not swearing into your face. They're not doing things. They're not assaulting you or pinching your backside or calling you, obscene nicknames. Low-level misogyny. Just describe it to someone who has spent 51 years somehow not noticing it. If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. And if Bob in Argyle rings in, I shall tear his blooming head off. 0345 6060 973. This macho toxic culture that means women have to change their behaviour. There's the question. We got there in the end. It only took 20 minutes. How do you change your behaviour because of macho culture or misogyny or whatever you prefer to call it? 0345 6060 973. It's 10:21. Feisty. Have you ever heard a man being called feisty? Is that evidence of what we're talking about here? Marnie puts it well in Glastonbury. The importance of not offending males is instilled in females from birth. It's just how things have always been in my life. And I would have read that on another day and I'd have gone, yes, that's terrible, isn't it? But something shifted for me yesterday when I noticed that you can rise to the deputy headship of the entire civil service and still have to do this, still have to cut your cloth according to the whims and attitudes of the men around you. I want your experiences of it. I want to know more. I want to get the kind of real world evidence. Special shout out to Stephen Ipswich, who was the second person to ring in on this topic, just as I told you there would be. And you sit here and you say, one example of just how completely unaware men are of the way in which they expect dominion over women, they expect dominance in the world. One example of that would be the way in which, if I'm having a phone-in topic about periods or women being sexually assaulted, then half a dozen men will ring in before I can even get a woman on. And there's Stephen Ipswich online too. Hannah is in Peterborough. Hannah, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. So I've got a couple of points. My first one is the fact that until you sort of talk about it, you don't really realise that you're doing it. So I'm in my early 40s, and at work I've been aware that I have to almost guide the men in positions of authority really subtly so that they think that it's their idea. But I think we sort of sell it to ourselves thinking, we're being clever. Yeah. We're kind of helping to smooth the path. But we shouldn't have to do it. And as I thought more on it, it made me think about my children. I've got a 10-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. And so the term bossy is something that's mostly used as a pejorative to women.
Yes, it is, isn't it? Yes.
And so we carefully...
Do you ever talk about a bossy man? Do we ever talk about a bossy man?
Never.
No.
No, it's something that I get really I feel my heckles if anybody sort of talks about, if she's telling us what to do, she's kind of being quite directive. And I don't like to use the word bossy. I hate it if people call children, like little girls, bossy, because I just think
I mean, I thought we were going to be talking about the workplace, but we've started off in kindergarten, haven't we?
Mm.
A bossy girl. You'd never call a little boy bossy. Well, you might, I suppose, in kindergarten, but it would soon divide. What do you mean when you say that you? Because I wonder whether Helen McNamara is looking at some of the responses to her email and the people and the women saying every woman will understand this, every woman will recognise this, and I wonder whether even she is going, crikey, I didn't even notice it. It's second nature. That's what you're saying, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's something that as women we have to hold families together, we have to hold communities together. We kind of like, it takes a village. All of that sort of mentality. We're very much like the peacemakers, and so it's deeply ingrained in us to kind of keep everyone happy, keep everything together. And so in the workplace, that approach, it continues to exist. And I think that, but it makes me mad.
Yes, of course. And I mean, what would happen if you didn't do it, do you think? You'd get a reputation for being bossy, or for being a troublemaker.
Yeah.
Or for being a ball breaker. There's another phrase that you don't hear applied to men.
Yeah.
Yeah, crikey. Yeah. Yeah, well, there it is. Thank you, Hannah. It's a perfect start. And I mean, think about that. You've got a little lad who's telling everyone what to do. You describe him as bossing everybody around, but you wouldn't talk about a bossy little boy in quite the same way that you talk about a bossy little girl. And quite a few of you pointing out it's still not uncommon for somebody to ask to speak to your husband if he's coming around to provide a quote or fix something. But in the workplace, that's what Hannah's touched on, the idea that you, like Helen McNamara, you phrase yourself in a way that is apologetic and making excuses because you don't want to offend or upset men. Jessica's in Barnet. Jessica, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James.
Hello, Jess.
So my partner's in a new job at the moment, and it's really exciting. It's kind of his first step into management.
Right.
And as a kind of in myself, I really enjoy persuasive writing, and generally family members will come to me and say, "Oh, how would you write this?" And it's what I'm known for. In my workplace, I will write. Intentionally, apologetically, I recognise that I'm doing it. In my partner's new role, sometimes he said, "Oh, what do you think? Should I say it like that, or should I say it like this?" And we've kind of edit what he's written together, just while he's getting used to the job.
Sure.
And I've only just now realised that I'm writing vicariously through him, and I'm writing how I would love to write, knowing that.
But if it was your name at the bottom of the email, you wouldn't write like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
And just listening to, the conversation and your previous caller, it's just, it's just rung home to me. And I think that's just so sad, really.
It's incredible, though. Because it's right there under your nose. But until someone's pointed at it, you hadn't even you hadn't noticed properly. Fully.
Yeah.
So what sort of thing? Can you think of an example? Because I think that first line of Helen McNamara's email is a straight up apology. I'm so sorry for bringing this. Just when you thought you were out of the woods on annoying emails from me. She sounds so lovely, doesn't she, doing that? It's like she's bringing something to the attention of the head of the NHS that could be a matter of life and death. If a nurse is wearing a mask that doesn't fit because we're buying millions of masks that are designed for men's faces, and 89% of nurses are women. This is not something that is an annoying email, but she's obviously worried about having a reputation for being irritating, and we now know that Dominic Cummings was polishing that reputation for her by calling her the C word and complaining about her throwing stilettos in his direction and bothering him with matters of ethics. God forbid that Dominic Cummings should have to abide by any code of ethics or propriety. And she's writing just when you thought you were out of the woods on annoying emails from me. You'd never write that if you were doing your husband's. If you were helping your husband.
You wouldn't. It's absolutely shocking. And if the boot was on the other foot or the mask was on the other face, you would be saying just simply the masks don't fit.
Yeah.
Whoever's providing them, supplying
FFS
them.
FFS guys, these masks are designed for men. It's mad.
Exactly.
Well, there you go. I'm glad I'm not alone. I'm glad it's not just men that are being slightly taken by surprise by this whole thing. Thank you, Jessica. It's 10:31 and time for the news headlines. 10:35 is the time. Of course, it's highly unlikely that you were listening to or watching Helen McNamara's testimony yesterday. So I'll play you a couple of clips in a minute. But first, Aisha Hazarika, who's worked quite high up in politics and the media, she picked up on this letter from Helen McNamara. And she puts it perfectly. She says, Helen has shone a light on the sexism which exists in politics and beyond. So many women will empathise with not being taken seriously, having to make yourself small, pleading, and a culture of male dominance. This is why having a critical mass of women in the room matters so much. And of course, Dominic Cummings trying to claim he's not misogynistic because he hired lots of young women almost proves the point, because they'd have been terrified of him. Not least because he's the kind of bloke that sends emails to the Prime Minister calling them C words and complaining about them throwing stilettos at him. Have a listen to Helen McNamara responding directly to some of Dominic Cummings' comments in her testimony yesterday.
The way in which it was considered appropriate to describe what should happen to me, yes as a woman, but yes as a civil servant, it's disappointing to me that the Prime Minister didn't pick him up on the use of some of that violent and misogynistic language.
What is your reaction to what appears to have been his failure to try and stop that sort of language, that sort of attitude prevailing?
It is just miles away from what is right or proper or decent or what the country deserves.
Blimey. Miles away from what was proper or decent and what the country deserves. She's not wrong, is she? And that's another point I'd missed. Why the hell is Boris Johnson not replying? Well, this is a rhetorical question. Saying you simply can't talk about people like that, Cummings. You simply can't talk about people like that. And then Hugo Keith, who's having a pretty good week, isn't he? Actually, no, this is Andrew O'Connor, who read out some of Helen McNamara's witness statement.
Shortly after, the conversation went back to the assertion that we were so well prepared, we shouldn't panic. And you say you left the room even more concerned that we were in the wrong place tonally, feeling I had been patronised for raising the point, and I was particularly bothered by the supreme confidence I had heard. The atmosphere and discussion in the morning meetings was confident and macho. We were going to be world-beating at conquering COVID-19 as well as everything else. Mr. Johnson was very confident that the UK would sail through.
It's what we touched on at the beginning of the show. I'm supposed to be furiously plugging my new book, which is published today, but it was actually in my last book, How Not to Be Wrong, that I wrote about how a public school education like mine prepares you in the worst imaginable way for dealing with a genuine crisis. And there, in Helen McNamara's words, is the proof of the pudding. You sort of think you can bluster your way, stiff upper lip your way through a pandemic. Britain is world-beating. Absolutely catastrophic. And finally, she describes a specific conflict between herself and Dominic Cummings, which I'm going to give you a spoiler on this because I want you to fully appreciate what happened here. We managed to find some surprisingly warm words for Dominic Cummings yesterday. It was before this emerged. You remember Frost, David Frost, the absolute lemon who was put in charge of negotiating our withdrawal from the European Union and then signed a deal that he was trying to disown or got Johnson to sign a deal that they were both trying to disown before the ink was even wet on their signatures. Subsequently taking up a role as a provider of utter bilge in the pages of the Daily Telegraph. You will simply not believe the job that Dominic Cummings wanted to give him.
The things that Mr. Cummings, having seen those messages, it was, it's horrible to read, but it is both surprising and not surprising to me, and I don't know which is worse, actually. I think that he was frustrated with me at the time. I would absolutely own that. I would also say all I was doing was actually working in the service of the then Prime Minister and defending his interests. I'm sure lots of this is not for you, but the two things in particular that he was cross about, one was the appointment of David Frost as the National Security Advisor, where the proposal was that Mr. Frost, who had left the civil service as a director, and then taken on very significant political roles, that he be then reappointed into the civil service as a permanent secretary and put in charge of national security. And for reasons I don't probably have to go into, I thought that was wrong, so I wouldn't let that happen, and had in fact come up with a proposal that would fulfil what the Prime Minister wanted, which is that Mr Frost should join the Lords and be a minister, because I felt that was more proper and have accountability. Mr Cummings in those messages is also frustrated with me and says that I was sacking special advisors, which I never did, would never be my role. The particular thing that he looks to be extremely cross about in the August is because we were involved in an employment tribunal where he had in fact dismissed a special advisor, and I was insisting on him telling the truth to the employment tribunal, and he didn't respond well to that. So, I mean, yes, surprising and not surprising. It wasn't a pleasant place to work.
Understatement of the century there, I think, from the former deputy head of the civil service. You know, I mentioned the new book a moment ago. I'm on tour with it at the moment. I was on stage in Bath last night, and the thing that is hardest to communicate to people is how every rock you look under, you find 10 more rocks. So you can talk about how you think you've reached rock bottom, and then, I don't know, Nadine Dorries is made Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, or you think things can't possibly get any worse, and you find out that Boris Johnson was laughing at the Italians. David Frost, who, as she explained, left the civil service because he'd peaked at a relatively low level. He went off to run the Scotch Whisky Association up in Edinburgh, where he made fairly half-decent speeches about how stupid it would be to leave the European Union. Bringing him back in to an organisation he'd left because he'd peaked at a relatively mid-management level as a senior honcho in charge of national security. Just, I mean, it would beg a belief if you were talking about any other administration at any other point in British history. Here's a great one, actually. James, every male boss I've ever had, good or bad, seems to feel the need to take me down a notch when I approach them with confidence for an idea or an issue. So over my 25-plus year career in technology, I've had to adjust my approach to ask for help instead. And then they are all too happy to hear what I've got to say. It's really demoralising. I'm almost certain that I could be in that category, you know. I'll have to have a long chat with the producer after the show. I don't think that she comes to me asking for help when she's actually presenting me with brilliant ideas. Today's phone-in show was her idea, for example, the fact that this would make a really interesting conversation. But my goodness me, that's an uncomfortable read, I think, for a lot of men, an uncomfortable listen, because you're even kind enough to say every male boss I've had, good or bad, even the good bosses prefer you to approach asking for help when in fact you're sharing a brilliant idea. Beatrice is in Edgware. Beatrice, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi. I'm a freelance journalist, and I...
Aren't we all?
and I kept being at press events, and the women would say, sorry, but did I miss that?
Yes.
And the blokes would just ask a direct question, and it was driving me mad. So I decided to look into it. And I found that there was a Canadian sociologist called Dr. Maya Jonovich, who I spoke to, and 8 years ago attended a conference. All female academics spoke. They all have experts. They've written academic papers. They all apologized in some way for being in the audience. And she did it, actually changed her career.
Wow.
So she wrote a TED talk, How Apologies Are Confidence, which has been viewed 100,000 times. And it's women. And it's extraordinary because what I found was that the more you apologize, the more it hacks away at women's self-confidence. And I thought that was fascinating. There's also a Google plugin that Helen Manara, might want, which is just not sorry. And it notifies you every time you say, I'm sorry. Oh, excuse me, but, do you mind me bothering?
Yes. Always. At every turn. And simply not, this is not language that men speak.
No, and I think that women have to look at themselves, because that's why I looked into it and just go, hang on, sorry, I'm going to sort of flick an elastic band. Why am I saying that? Because apologies are really, really important, okay, when they're meant. And when they're, apologies and are important. But if you're apologising for yourself, you are plugging away at your confidence. It's chipping away. And by the end of the day, you're going to be exhausted by apologising.
Have you changed the way you behave?
Yep. Well,
How?
I actually tell my friends, why are you apologising? You know, articles, sorry, but Meghan, why are you saying sorry, but?
Or just,
about it
here's a good
I
one.
think,
Sorry.
Oh, no, pardon me. I'm angry about it because when I looked into it, it just seemed to me that we all need to look at ourselves. And I've done training, and that's been popular, PR training, public relations training. And that has been the most popular one I've done.
Really?
And it's changed people's confidence. Yeah.
And it doesn't have, I need to phrase this question quite carefully, but it doesn't have negative connotations. It doesn't then see women actually almost becoming self-fulfilling prophecies when they return to work in a less apologetic fashion. They don't end up getting sidelined or...
Great question. That's a great question. Result is, journalist, the result is that they actually get more respect. They get more respect. They're listened to more.
Social conditioning, isn't it?
Yes, it is from childhood. It also, neuroplasticity, it changes that too.
Because it becomes almost a reflex rather than a conscious behaviour. You'll like this, I think, from Brenda in Whitstable, Beatrice. She says, I coach women in senior positions, and however much they have achieved, the instilled requirement to be small, to be quiet, to be inoffensive and to be non-confrontational is so hard to unpick. No woman wants to feel ugly, which is what they are made to feel that these things look like. Even to stop beginning an email with the words just wanted is really difficult.
Oh, well, they need the plug-in, don't they? I don't work for Google, but it's a good one.
Well, thanks for the recommendation.
The TED Talk, have a look at how apologies kill our confidence. That would be really good.
How apologies kill our confidence. 10:47 is the time. Thank you, Beatrice. It's been one of those conversations, this, hasn't it, where you can feel light bulbs popping all over this. Well, certainly all over the studio, and I hope all over wherever you're listening as well. It's 10:47. It's 10:51. I can't complete any conversation about yesterday's testimony from Helen McNamara without a nod to Hugo Keith, who spent some time on Tuesday, of course, questioning Dominic Cummings about the comments he had made about Helen McNamara. Dominic Cummings at the moment spitting his dummy out on social media because he's insisting that he's not remotely misogynistic. He called Helen McNamara a C-word who was throwing stilettos at him and said he wanted to handcuff her. But he's definitely not misogynistic. Have a little listen to that. This is from Tuesday, of course.
If I have to come back to Helen's with PET, was that propriety and ethics?
Yes.
Part of the Cabinet Office, or number 10. Designed to waste huge amounts of my time so I can't spend it on other stuff, I'll personally handcuff her and escort her from the building. Had you got form, Mr. Cummings, for arranging for people to be escorted from number 10 before?
You shouldn't believe everything you read in the newspapers. That story is not accurate.
I don't care how it's done, but that woman must be out of our hair. We cannot keep dealing with this horrific meltdown of the British state while dodging stilettos from that.
Definitely not a misogynist. And that language that Helen McNamara herself employs when writing to a male official about the need for PPE that actually fits women's faces is a consequence of the culture that Dominic Cummings is perhaps an extreme exemplar of. Carrie is in Dublin. Carrie, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hey.
I've spoken to you before, and it's been around my workplace as well. And I just want to really there's two parts to this, my point. I actually dialed the number 3 times, and I hung up twice because I thought, oh no, I better not talk about this. And then I just felt so compelled to speak about something that happened in recent years.
Sure.
So I work for quite a large company. We got a female CEO for the first time in history. And, the news that came out that day, it was, really exciting. And I had a conversation with male peers on a call, a group call. And it made me question whether I was in the wrong. But all the vocabulary was around, trying to justify why a female got the job. I hear she's very, very capable. And I just felt compelled to say...
No kidding.
You've never said that word before. You don't use any of the previous male CEOs. You've never called them capable. And maybe I blurted it out, but it wasn't received very well at all. And actually, after the call ended, one of my peers rang me separately and said, I don't think you should have said that, and I think it made you look silly. And it really, it made me question, was I in the wrong? Am I being difficult? But I just found it really offensive. I mean, of course she's capable. She's just been appointed to the head of a really large company. I just found it really...
What are they doing?
Again, I think...
So it's a double whammy, this, isn't it? Because you're there's a whammy when it happens, and then a whammy for you when you call it out. But what do you think's going on in their head? Why did these men feel the need to almost qualify your boss's promotion?
I think it's unconscious bias in the first instance. But I think then the subsequent call I got a peer, which is just pure sexism. You shouldn't have said that. On the flip side of that, my company are trying so hard to combat unconscious bias. I've mentioned it before. I have a great boss, but the company, I've been nominated to go on a course about empowering women to get promotions and to challenge unconscious bias. I don't blame my company. Again, I'm apologising for my male peers. I don't even blame them really. But, it's going to take a lot of time and effort and people calling out bad behaviours. But I called out, not a bad behaviour, but I called out an unusual behaviour.
An unconscious bias. You called out an unconscious bias.
Yeah, and I got scolded for it.
Yeah,
so,
which proves it.
Women, it would make me maybe not speak out again. Yes. But just on this, like my sister runs her own business and she was looking for new business. And she had her name as Natalie in her email, and she got very little reply. And when she changed it to Nat, plus her surname, the increase in responses she's got was notable.
How interesting.
So it's just, I think, I'd like to think it's unconscious bias throughout. In the cases of Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings, I mean...
Yeah,
speechless.
Same.
The fish rots from the head, and oh my God, did Downing Street stink in that period of time. So I just think I have a daughter. I want her to be able to speak out without being scolded.
Scolded is an amazing word as well, because only women get scolded, really, don't they?
In my experience, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I think, in vocabulary as well. I know women are scolds as well. There's scold's bridle in medieval times. It may be one of those apocryphal stories, but I don't think it is, where there'd be a sort of form of gagging put on a woman who had a reputation for scolding or nagging her husband. Carrie, thank you. This is interesting. My female boss said that when I told senior members of staff, majority male, that I didn't agree or like their ideas, that I was coming across as negative and prickly. She suggested that I should instead say, that's a great idea, and in addition, we should also consider. If she says that to men as well, then all well and good, but it seems unlikely, doesn't it? Erica is in Lancaster. Erica, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, Erica.
Coming back to what Beatrice said earlier, so I'm an academic who studies women's leadership. So one of the things that's well recognised is that in order to be recognised as being a leader, you have to make a claim to that and be agentic. But as a woman, often making that very claim is seen as acting in an overly masculine way, and that is rejected. So you have to put on a performance of femininity and try and balance the two. Otherwise, you'll be punished for being insufficiently female.
Yes.
And so, that's how you get, Ditch the Witch for Julia Gillard. That's how you get some of the horrible stuff around Hillary Clinton or kind of any woman leader.
Nicola Sturgeon.
Nicola Sturgeon, you quickly get this portrayal of them as kind of not proper women, not real wives, not appropriate. Julia Gillard was portrayed as being deliberately barren by an Australian senator. All that kind of stuff. But the story I called in to tell you was, so I was at a student staff forum this week, and as just kind of before the meeting quite started, that most people were in the room, I noticed that there was only one woman student rep in the room.
Right.
And I spoke to one of my male colleagues, another academic, and said, do you know if any of the other student reps are women? And he said, no. And I said, that's a bit of a problem. It looks like we've only got one woman student rep. And I said, we'll have to think about how we address that. And he said, oh, well, they were democratically elected. And I said, that's okay. Democracy has a well-known problem in electing women. And he's like, and he said, but that was democratic. And I said, it's okay. There are ways to address this, quotas, ballot weighting, and he got quite aggro about it and eventually kind of shut me down and shut the discussion down, and I was the only woman academic in the room. So we come back to that discussion about critical mass.
Yes.
And when we got to talking about equality and diversity issues, was one of my male first years who actually stood up and said, well, didn't stand up, but actually said, I think we should have that conversation, because my colleague had said this isn't a conversation for here.
Wow.
And my student said, and I'm uncomfortable with the way you closed that conversation down.
Gosh.
So it actually took one of my students to say to one of my colleagues, and he's meant to be teaching equality and diversity and inclusion in his classroom.
Yeah.
Took one of my students
to tell him what it is, to show him what it is.
To call him. And I'm autistic, so sometimes I get those cues wrong.
Right.
And I have been, for all my professional life, so I'm a woman who fails to model femininity in appropriate ways anyway.
Sure.
And given my research field and my autism, I often kind of assume that we're all on the same page right now about the idea that we should have better representation of women in these things. So when I raised it with a colleague, I thought I was talking to somebody who would agree with me. And so I probably hadn't shaped it.
That's fascinating.
In a way.
No, and that's not social conditioning, is it? That's your autism, and someone on the outside watching can see that what perhaps you couldn't. Wow, wow, you couldn't make that up. Actually, that context, that academic field, that conversation, that exchange. Thank you, Erica. I'm only cracking on because I'm a tiny bit late for the news. Last word to whoever sent this text, to James O'Brien. Dominic Cummings is not a misogynist. He sent those WhatsApp messages before he had his eyes tested. It's 11:01. 5 minutes after 11 is the time. We may well return to, we definitely will return to that conversation at some point in the future, because it's one that obviously is only just starting in some quarters, including this one. I just because I'm weird that way, was having a look at page 4 of the Daily Mail today, which is where they report upon the toxic culture where women are overlooked. And they're continuing this astonishing attempt to cover Boris Johnson's handling of the COVID crisis without barely mentioning Boris Johnson. So the only time he appears in this article about his senior advisor and the woman who was deputy head of the civil service when he was prime minister, the only mention he gets in the entire article is this. The former chief Downing Street aide urged Boris Johnson to sack Ms McNamara for causing trouble. No mention at all of what she said about him, Johnson, or the conclusion that he was responsible for the toxic culture that she has described. Obviously, he writes a column for the Daily Mail, so whoever writes these articles is being ordered to keep Boris Johnson as out of it as you possibly can. And so a story about an inquiry into a Prime Minister's handling of a COVID-19 and his government's handling of a catastrophe, if you are a Daily Mail reader, is being conducted in a way that is designed to keep the actual central figure of the entire story as much in the background, as far in the background as is humanly possible. Just take a moment to reflect upon that. I think it's still the best-selling newspaper in the country. It's also chapter 2 of How They Broke Britain, my new book published today, how the editor-in-chief of this newspaper, Paul Dacre, is responsible for polluting public discourse in a way that is almost beyond belief. But if I'd needed an example of it, if I'd had to invent an example of it, I couldn't have come up with a better example of this than this. An alleged newspaper considered by Wikipedia to be an unreliable source for news, and yet still the one that conservative politicians care more about than anything else. An alleged newspaper trying to cover Boris Johnson's government's handling of the COVID-19 catastrophe while keeping Boris Johnson as far in the background as is humanly possible because they're paying him £500,000 a year to write a column. That's not just bad for newspapers. That's bad for Britain. That's bad for democracy. That's bad for public discourse. And it's so completely normal that this is quite possibly the only place in the UK media where it will be properly called out. And I say possibly because I don't want to sound even cockier than usual. But there it is, which is part of the reason why we're going to talk about something completely different next. We're going to talk about AI. So I said to you a while ago, probably about 6 months, do you think, was it? About 6 months ago? I said to you, this is going to be a topic that we will come to on an irregular basis, probably an increasingly frequent basis, but on an irregular basis because it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. There's a famous aphorism in the world of technology about microprocessors. I think it is they get twice as powerful and half the size with every iteration. So that's why everything's tiny now. That's why you've got a watch that can do things you'd have needed a computer the size of a house to do when you were a kid. Microprocessing, I'm probably getting the words wrong, but you understand the point that I'm making. And artificial intelligence is on a sort of similarly exponential course, but it still breaks down between people who say it could be the end of the world as we know it and people who say, oh, would you just relax? It's not that bad. That's the interesting thing for me, or one of the interesting things for me about this is every time the new chapter is published, the same battle is described. And yesterday it was two interesting protagonists who were really resurrecting precisely the same squabble. Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk, he's the fellow, if you don't know, he runs Tesla, owns Tesla, and he trying to send rockets into space, and he bought Twitter for, I think, $44 billion, and it's currently worth 19 after about a year. So he's quite a chaotic individual. He's ruined Twitter in many ways, but, you know, if you're mildly addicted to it, you probably haven't been able to turn off the intravenous drip just yet, even if you want to. That's probably the position I'm in. But he's quite a chaotic individual. I'm not sure, and he's clearly got a brain that is special in some ways, but we've got this astonishing flaw in our reasoning of very rich people, is we think they must be brilliant at everything. It's quite bizarre, isn't it? So there's someone that is brilliant at making microchips, therefore they'd be brilliant at owning a football team. Why would, what are you talking about? It's like saying I'm very good at hopscotch, so I'd be a brilliant nuclear physicist. But AI is technology, and Tesla is technology, and Twitter, well, he's ruined Twitter. So he's a score draw, isn't he? It's a score draw. Tesla, win. Twitter, massive loss. So quite why you would turn to him as a sage, an authority, a world-beating authority on AI, I'm not 100% sure, but that is what they've done. He has been invited to the UK government's AI Safety Summit at Bletchley Park in Buckinghamshire. This is a slightly touching attempt by Rishi Sunak to pretend that we still have the sort of stature and status on the world stage that we had before 2016. And essentially he's cast himself in the role of a Tupperware party host. But by being the host, he can sort of pretend that he's the most important person in the room. And two people have clashed over artificial intelligence. Elon Musk has said that it poses one of the biggest threats to humanity. Now, there will be people listening to this who have followed events much more closely than I have. And I make no apology for that. I can't follow everything as closely as I follow something. So you can take up the slack on the AI story. But I think that the apocalyptic scenario Elon Musk described involved somebody who is very, very, very worried about the environment, very, very worried about the planet, programming AI to destroy humanity, right? That is the nightmare scenario that Elon Musk has provided. And it's concerning for three reasons. The first and most obvious is that it might be true. Maybe it is a genuine fear that we should hold, that a Just Stop Oil extremist, and by that I'm not describing Just Stop Oil as extreme. I'm describing a member of Just Stop Oil who adopts much, 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 much more extreme tactics than his or her colleagues. So a Just Stop Oil or an Extinction Rebellion extremist somehow manages to program artificial intelligence, and if Michelle Donnellan understands what that involves, and I shall give you the money myself, program artificial intelligence to destroy humanity in order to save the planet. So the first thing that's worrying about this is the possibility that it might be true. And there's your starter for 10. 0345 6060 973. Knowing what you know about AI, which is quite possibly just as much as Elon Musk. Is he talking gibberish? I nearly swore then. I've got to be careful. 0345 6060 973. Is there a very real risk that a hardcore environmental activist could destroy all humans in order to save the planet via the medium of artificial intelligence? Yes or no? I'm sounding a little sort of condescending, which almost certainly means I'm going to sound stupid in 20 minutes when you explain to me why Elon Musk actually has a very, very important point. So that's fear number one. He could be right. To balance out that, I would tell you that Nick Clegg, remember him, he says don't panic. He's a bit like Pike. No, who says don't panic in Dad's Army? Anyway, he's a bit like the character in Dad's Army who keeps saying don't panic. Nick Clegg says the dangers are overstated. The people within too many people, he said many people within the industry agree with him, and governments shouldn't be micromanaging tech companies through legislation. He would say that, of course, partly because he earns a significant chunk of change every year as the vice chairman of Meta, the company that owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. President of Global Affairs, I beg your pardon. That is Nick Clegg's job description. So President of Global Affairs for a massive tech company says governments shouldn't bother tech companies with too much legislation. So, it doesn't mean he's wrong. It doesn't mean Musk's wrong. But they are in complete disagreement with each other, and I'd like to know who you agree with. Okay, so that's question stroke fear number one. Question stroke fear number two is that Elon Musk is a muppet, which seems to me to be a very real possibility. He's sort of flirting with white supremacy on the platform that he bought and has seen it, I think, roughly halve in value. And he's also, if there's a lazy right-wing bandwagon, Elon Musk is trying to buy it, not just get on it like most people, but he wants to actually buy the bandwagon. And that includes eco-protesters. You know, these dreadful, dreadful people who are so worried about our future that they risk their own liberty to sound the alarm bell. They're the people you should really be worried about. That and Marks and Spencer's adverts. They're the real threat to our security and democracy at the moment. But he is also part of that. So it might just be that this is the big tech equivalent of a Daily Mail column. Who can we have a swing at today? Let's have a swing at eco-protesters. That's going to be difficult. You're at a summit about AI. Not difficult at all. I'll tell you what could happen next, lads. Some eco-protester could destroy humanity using AI. So that's the second worry, is that this is just a really weapons-grade attack upon environmental protesters. And worry number three is probably one you won't be able to ring in on, but I hope you do. Worry number three is a sort of what is going on? Where is the truth between these two positions? How worried should we be, regardless of whether or not an environmental protester is capable or likely to seek to destroy humanity using artificial intelligence? How worried should we be about it? And I've asked you that question now 4 or 5 times, and every phone-in has been slightly different, and I still don't fully understand why. 0345 6060 973. Is Elon Musk right to tell us that AI could describe humanity? He threatens humanity itself? Or is Nick Clegg right when he says that dangers and worries like that are overstated? And then, regardless of whether that particular apocalyptic scenario is plausible or not, not even how worried should we be, but if than I do, which is not going to be a particularly difficult club to join, if you know more about this than I do, how worried are you about what the future might hold for humanity? Do you know why I like this topic? partly because usually when a question is quite straightforward and predictable, I think it's lazy on my part and therefore not particularly scintillating radio for you. But this is one of the exceptions to the rule. I can roughly, every 3 or 4 months, I can say, how worried should we be about AI? Admittedly, it took me 20 minutes to say that in the introduction, but that is essentially the central question, and it is the single most important and interesting question on this issue. So that's one of the reasons why I like it. But of course, the important thing to remember is the success of any conversation we have together about this depends entirely on how many people ring in who are better informed than you and me. And that is what we're about to discover. And we'll start with Peter, who's in Ipswich. Peter, what do you reckon?
Good morning, James. I think the problem is quite serious, actually.
Hello, mate. What were you doing? Building up a bit of tension there by pausing, or did you have your phone in your pocket? Oh, I've got a delay on my line, apparently. My apologies to you. I'll shut up for a while and let you talk.
Well, I mean, I think it's quite serious. At the moment, we're seeing all these different bits of AI in a sort of disjointed way. So you've got like the face copying technologies where you can fake somebody's motion and their face. You're seeing the audio copying where you can copy somebody's vocal cords basically and speak through them. And you're also seeing text as well. So you can write an article in the voice of another person. What's scary is when you sort of join them all up together and you can create a sort of virtual person that can essentially read, write, speak, using somebody else's personality. So
But that's not an existential threat to humanity.
Well, I mean, let's say that
I can't work with the delay on this line. I do apologise. It's not your fault. I can't. The conversation is. I mean, if it's driving me nuts, goodness knows what it will be doing to people who are listening. It's categorically not your fault, but it's a technological glitch that does not lend itself to this medium. But maybe we'll get a better line and we'll come back to you. But in the meantime, let's go to Milton Keynes. All the good stuff happens in Milton Keynes. Dave is there. Dave, what would you like to say?
Well, I was just going to say, I think a lot of it is overhyped. I think it is, as you said, it's Rishi Sunak trying to make himself look all important when fundamentally, as you said, he's pretty much made us all irrelevant to Brexit and all the other nonsense. Fundamentally, I don't think we need to worry about Skynet taking over quite yet. But that said, there are applications of AI which are problematic, and they need to be handled on a one-by-one basis, I think. And they need to be, you've got to think in terms of, instead of thinking all scary AI, you've got to think facial recognition technology. How could that be misapplied? How could that be used in a way that would be inappropriate, put people at risk? Similarly, as the previous caller,
I'm going to pause you there. Because there is, with my enormous apologies to everybody, that it wasn't Peter's line that had a problem. It was actually at my end of the situation, and Dave is labouring under the same problem. So what I'm going to do is cunningly pretend that I am deliberately playing you a little clip of Elon Musk speaking about this yesterday while we try and fix whatever technological glitch has got into our system at this end. So here is a little bit of Elon Musk yesterday, who I've completely misrepresented, by the way. My colleague from LBC News, Christopher Golds, has been in touch to mark my homework and point out that he is actually, for reasons that I probably should have been across, he's a very, very, very reasonable and even obvious person to invite to an AI summit, not least because Tesla is doing an insane amount of work in the field, and because he was on the board of OpenAI, and because Twitter or X is a huge source of data for AI learning. So I consider myself scolded on that front. But here is a little of what he said yesterday.
Elon, I'm from Sky News. Do you think AI is a threat to humanity still?
It's a risk. A little bit of fear is probably wise. I think you've got a double-edged sword, which where I think most likely I should say that my personal opinion is that AI is sort of like at least 80% likely to be beneficial, and perhaps 20% dangerous. Although this is obviously speculative at this point, but I think if we hope for the best but prepare for the worst. That seems like the wise course of action. But I think the probability of extremely bad is low. I think the more we pay attention to it, the more we care about it, the more we minimize the probability of something going wrong.
So there is a lesson for us all there, because I took my coverage from the front page of the Daily Mail, which says Musk's chilling alert over AI, and then inevitably they use it as an opportunity to attack Nick Clegg. The bit in my new book, by the way, about how Paul Dacre treated Nick Clegg's wife, according to Nick Clegg's wife, is absolutely fascinating. And by calling her Nick Clegg's wife, of course, I've just indulged in a little bit of the low-level misogyny that we were talking about in the first hour. I refer to Miriam Gonzalez Durantes. She is Nick Clegg's wife, but that's not what she is known for. But the question still stands, even if it is a rather more measured warning than you'd gather from some of the newspaper coverage. How worried should we be? I'll go back to Dave in Milton Keynes. Everything should be up and running now. They've managed, the AI has fixed the gremlins. So let's take it from the top, Dave. How worried should we be, and up to and including existential threat to humanity?
I think the bigger existential threat to humanity is global warming, which incidentally Sunak didn't have a lot to say about, did he?
It's a very good point. But
parking all that aside, I think the term AI, fundamentally, it's applied statistics, isn't it? It's trying to sort of, predict and sort of everything else, as statistics have been doing for generations. And I feel that with this AI summit, it's a bit like saying, oh, but the motor car, what about the motor car?
I can't believe you said that, because my friend Keith, not that one, another one, he literally just WhatsApped me and said, do you think in 20 odd years the conversation on AI will be like the ones you don't like about cars? Only people of a certain age and over will be worried about it.
Well, I think, you have got a lot. I think actually, in fairness to Musk, as much as I'm not a fan, what he said was actually a lot more, as you said, a lot more measured than the reporting, and I've only just heard the actual quote myself now as well. But yes, there are problems with AI. There are already problems with AI in the sense that recommendation algorithms and what gets fed to our kids through their smartphones. That, as a parent, is something that constantly worries me. So that's where the problems with AI exist. Things like, and they are specific. You need to, just in the same way as you have rules of the road, and this is how you should drive. And I don't like Rishi Sunak now going on about cars, but this is how you drive. You don't say, oh, but the motor car. You say you need to drive 20 miles an hour, or 30 miles an hour apparently.
Some people get very cross about that, of course. But they're the people to whom Rishi Sunak seems to spend most of his political career appealing at the moment. But you're absolutely right. A libertarian motorway system would be, be carnage, wouldn't it?
Well, I agree. So, I'm not, and equally, I think there already are, I'm arguing against myself, but there are some issues with AI. Recommendation algorithms, I think, are particularly scary about people going down rabbit holes and getting fed more and more content.
But that's quite low level. That is literally just the technological equivalent of a bookshop saying, if you like this, you'll love this, and then pushing you onto the books.
Agreed. Agreed. This is why I find this whole thing about AI a bit frustrating, because, I think that type of AI is already kind of quite problematic. And we should be looking at that kind of thing. We should be looking at those specific things where there are perhaps societal problems coming around. I think it's the societal problems we need to be looking at, not going, oh, AI, isn't it scary? I don't think that's a particularly helpful line. And sort of Rishi talking about what about the existential threats of AI? No, it's the applications of AI, the inappropriate applications of AI.
And the stuff that's already going on, and it just doesn't make sexy newspaper copy or sexy conversations. I like that, actually, because I was thinking that you were wrong, because what you were describing wasn't about the future power of AI, but actually, to coin a motoring analogy, which is rare for me, we should be looking at the road not only directly ahead of us instead of 200 miles hence, but we should be really concerned about what's already in the rearview mirror. 11:30 is... Thank you, Dave. I'm going to crack on. 11:30 is the time. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. It is 11:34, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Caroline points out something quite pertinent. She says, hang on, you called Elon Musk a muppet, and you immediately got tech issues. And then you said something nice about him, and the tech issues suddenly disappeared. Caroline adds, you're not wrong. But how worried should we be? I apologize. I don't know. 10 minutes ago, I was delighted with the simplicity of that question because we can ask it every 6 months with interesting consequences. But then 10 minutes later, I'm thinking, should we have come up with a slightly more sophisticated treatment? I don't think so. Barry is in Berlin. Barry, what do you think?
Hello, James.
Hello, Barry.
I'm a bit with. I'm not a huge fan of Elon Musk, right? But I think that his double-edged sword comment is pretty bang on. You know, our fears are speculative, and our response should be, I would hope, calm and measured, right? But I also really understand people's concerns, right? There's this myth of like Prometheus, Frankenstein, Oppenheimer, Terminator 2, etc. These are like frightening cultural touch points, particularly for a sort of a future that, you know, regular folks who don't work in the industry and don't talk about these topics day to day aren't really equipped to understand like what's coming, you know.
Yes.
Myself, I work in software. My company is at sort of the intersection of science and AI, and I see a few real risks in the future and things that are actually happening today. You know, there's always the risk, of course, of I forget who the other person that mentioned it was, but like these unintended consequences.
Yes.
An AI might interpret, you know, harmless human directives in a way that's too literal or unanticipated, leading to catastrophic outcomes. There's an example in my field where we talk about the paperclip example, where you instruct an AI to build paperclips, and then it goes about converting all materials into paperclips, including essential infrastructure, you know, just things, simple things getting out of control. And of course, there's always the risk of connecting AI with, you know, if you give it control of weapons, food production, energy supplies, financial markets, that could have potentially disastrous consequences. And of course, as one of your previous callers mentioned there's the risk, which is happening today, of the manipulation of information, of making truth uncertain. We talked about this a lot in the past around the time of the Facebook scandal with Cambridge Analytica.
Yes.
Manipulating media, communications, data at scale. And these are things that happen today, but the speed and scale is, if that were to happen, that would be pretty much impossible for humans to counter, and that could have destabilizing impacts on society, economies, global order, the whole thing, right?
Yes. How? Just talk me through it, because you're presuming a level of knowledge very generously that I don't have. Just at a very simple level, how would AI control food production?
Well, you could start with so for example, today you've got like supply chain issues, you know?
Yeah.
Getting food of good quality efficiently to the shops and to your place, right? And that's simply software that's plugged into systems, you know, planning deliveries, you know, the lamps in grow houses, the manufacture of fertilizers, et cetera, right? Software today is used to control and manage all of these systems.
So we could end up with too much stuff we don't need and none of the stuff we do need, as it were.
Yeah, or you could just have some bad actor just go and tinker with that and turn it off. Or
I wish you'd had me on. I wish you hadn't had me on speaker. I wish you'd been using the phone properly from the beginning. The quality of the line just improved exponentially, Barry.
Sorry, it's my fuzzy beard, James. It sometimes gets in the way of the microphone. I don't have it on hands-free.
No, carry on.
Right, but I also think that there are all of these possible doomsday scenarios. They are possible, but they're improbable, and I think there's a lot of hope to be had here as well, because, for example, like I said, this is just software, right? It's designed and built by humans, which means that there's human interests being embedded in the architecture of these systems by design, human oversight, etc. They're being designed with beneficial aims, and of course there's always room for these unintended consequences. But
yes.
Even at the moment, there are discussions happening in the UK, here in Germany, all around the world about regulation, right? How do we make sure that these systems are designed to benefit humans, that we're mitigating the risks of these disastrous consequences and using it responsibly? They are just tools at the end of the day, right?
Of course.
And I also think there's, you know, we talk about right now, it's just, you know, hyper automation. But in the future, we could be presented with the possibility of a real general artificial intelligence, as we call it, like like what we see in sci-fi films. And I also think that if these systems, I predict that if these systems these entities do come about, that they would also have some element, some thought of self-preservation and a recognition that their survival, their success, their development and growth is coupled with our planet and the human population and so on, you know.
What would a regulation look like, Barry? Perhaps even the most obvious, something that you would forbid a tech company from doing, for example.
I think this is a really, really good question. I think it's about capacity and capability, right? Right now on your phone, you know, predictive text. Yeah. Right? It knows the messages you've written before, and it can help you to just take a shortcut and write the messages. That's a very low level form of, in air quotes, AI, right? But it's got a limited capability. It can't write messages on your behalf and so on, right? And then you have the other end of the scale where you have fully autonomous. It can make decisions. It can process information faster and better than humans can, etc. I think it's responsible that governments and industry have limitations on who can own these. I think personally, even though I work in the industry, I think it is a terrible idea for these technologies to be in the hands of private organizations. They should be heavily regulated, probably more than any other technology available.
So here attention is emerging then, because that would explain perhaps Nick Clegg's intervention on this, because the idea of governments taking away the toys of big tech companies, the incredibly profitable toys. And is this linked in a way to the concerns that many of us had when we realized just how much control Elon Musk had over the satellites that determined whether or not a military escapade undertaken by Ukraine would succeed or not? That power shouldn't lie in the hands of a private individual, never mind a private corporation.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. This is, and I think the real danger, forgetting about the sci-fi scenarios and the evil startup Machiavellian types, I think the real risk, the very present risk is much simpler. I think it's things like human redundancy, right? Software, in my industry, we say software is eating the world, right? Software touches every aspect of our jobs, and software ultimately is about, it's about saving effort and doing the hard work, but it's also redundancy, right? It's making human labor, human effort redundant. And we run the risk of replacing. What will we do? There are billions of people on Earth. What will we do in the future if robots and machines do all of the work? How will we earn? How will we feed ourselves? What will happen to society?
I mean, this is sort of universal basic income territory, and also probably ideas that nobody's even had yet.
Yeah, and also just the fun, if that's the right word, the fun and creativity of being a human with thoughts, who can be creative and innovative and solve problems. If that's taken away from us and we externalize that and make ourselves redundant, what are we for? What are we doing with ourselves if...
It's not mystery hour, mate.
As a society. I'll ring in on Thursday. Or later today, I forgot what day it is. You know what I mean? These are the things that we should be concerned about. Is like,
we don't know that they're not...
What is the purpose of society?
Right, yes. So they won't be having these conversations in Bletchley Park because they will be talking about the engineering side of it, whereas you're rightly reminding us of the importance of the philosophical side of it, really.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing that we need to keep an eye on, not nukes and disinformation. Those are manageable problems. Okay. It's just like, what happens to society when we're... In fact, WALL-E, I talk about this with my colleagues every day. That's the Pixar movie where...
Yeah, it's a good film. The little robot, the rubbish-collecting robot.
Yeah. And think about the humans on the ship. That, to me, is the perfect dystopian future, is humans who have nothing to do with their time, but... plotch around in wheelchairs and have the robots do all the cleaning, and they just shop and consume and don't really do anything. That to me is like the worst version of our, not to ruin a perfectly lovely film for everyone, but that to me is the risk of the future, not Terminator 2.
And that is not yet. It's almost like the mad rush towards technological advancement is blind to potential consequences, and they really should be front and center. Wow.
Yeah, we've already done it to the record industry, the news industry. Technology eats industries, and then there are unintended consequences.
Who would never be redundant? Because eventually, presumably, you reach a point where AI programs itself. Do you?
Yeah, I think it's going to be blue-collar workers, that sort of stuff, where you actually need people doing the things. It's at least in the near future. I can't see it's. I think those are the jobs of the future. My sort of work, knowledge work, intellectual work, accounting, programming, all of those jobs are going to go much sooner. I foresee the next 3 to 5 years.
Shut up!
It's
Seriously?
happening already. I do it today in my work. It's happening. What my company do in science, and I'm not going to plug out the business or anything, is we are helping scientific publishers deal with. We're helping scientific publishers to battle what are called paper mills, which are people trying to build careers for themselves in science by spamming the system with junk science by non-existent authors. This is a thing that's happening today. It's happening in every industry.
Yes, I've read about
it. It's really dangerous, actually. You think vaccines cause autism by an exponential factor. It's frightening.
It's complete hogwash.
Yeah, but also you've got people out there recognizing the problems, predicting the future, trying to build the tools to fight against that right now. And some of the other use cases that your callers talked about previously with, deep fakes and all that kind of stuff. I think we'll fix those problems. It's the longer term thing is what really worries me, as I mentioned.
It worries me now. Thanks for that, Barry. I've had enough on my plate with the state of the bloody nation without having to worry about the future of the species. But that is more compelling to me than the idea of an eco-terrorist programming AI to destroy humanity. It's almost as if we render our species redundant. Thank you, mate. It's 11:46. It's 10 to 12. We will be catching up with events at the COVID inquiry today. If you thought Matt Hancock was a little bit like David Brent but less likeable, I think you're about to be conclusively proved correct. But we'll wait for Henry Riley to give us the details. Before that, the AI conversation continues. Ash is in Stoke-on-Trent. Ash, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on. First off, some great contributions before me. Barry's was really good there. I think, for me, AI, it's becoming a bit of a scare team, if that makes sense. So what I'm hearing is it's sort of, especially from what Elon Musk's intervention was, it's going to be this almost like Terminator-like dystopia. I just can't see that as feasible. I think ultimately it's a human-created technology, and humans will always implement fail-safes.
It's a terrible phone line. It's a terrible phone line, Ash. I'm having all sorts of problems today. If I'm on speaker, can you take me off it?
Yeah, you're off speaker. Is that any better, James?
It is better. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So what do you think is going to happen?
I think ultimately what will happen is there's going to be a process of disruption. And then there'll be a leveling out, and we'll sort of figure out how we're going to work with this technology and we'll move forward. I work in the automotive industry, so I'm a bit cynical of Elon Musk's intervention because, well, you can understand it as well, Tesla are one of the leads in autonomous driving right now in the industry. And I think maybe he's protecting his own IP a little bit there. He's looking at sort of the threat that sort of AI more broadly is going to be when it comes to other companies.
So everybody else, you should be very worried about what everybody else is doing, but I'll just be quietly cracking on with pushing the boundaries ever further.
Yeah,
I hadn't thought of
that. Especially with autonomous driving, it's going to be a massive safety factor. So he wants to be the guy who goes to sort of, legislative bodies, nation states, local authorities and go, I've got this sort of end-to-end service which I can give you out the box. Don't worry about anyone else.
Got it.
Because, we're already legislated against their AI kind of thing. That's kind of maybe I'm being a bit cynical there.
No, well, nothing wrong with being a bit cynical. And then what about some of the stuff Barry was saying? Because you'd think, wouldn't it, a life without work sounds wonderful, but actually the more you think about it, an unconnected species, a species that doesn't need to do anything to survive or thrive even, is probably doomed in other ways.
maybe the optimist inside of me would hope that this would bring, a little bit more wealth redistribution and give us a little bit more time and allow us to sort of explore hobbies and interests a little bit more than we sort of do in the sort of 40-hour working week. That's the optimist in me. But like you say, it could render us useless and poor as well if it's sort of concentrated in these sort of.
And that's why these are the conversations that we should be having. Cheers, Ash. Thank you. I mean, in terms of what the future is going to look like, probably less helpful to talk about apocalyptic dystopias and more helpful to talk about how many jobs are going to be rendered simply redundant, and therefore how will society accommodate the huge coming disparity between the need to work and the need to thrive. Thank you, mate. Henry Riley has been following developments at today's COVID inquiry, and I haven't. So here he is.
James, good morning. This is Lord Stevens today, the former chief executive of the NHS. He was previously Sir Simon Stevens and then was made a peer. He was in charge from 2014 until 2021, so a significant period during the coronavirus pandemic. He spoke about a number of things, mostly, as you referenced, to do with Matt Hancock. He speaks about those early COBRA meetings, mostly in January and February of 2020. He says that he was at a lot of them, but the most striking thing was that Matt Hancock, if he chaired them, he said that certain cabinet ministers wouldn't attend and would just send their junior ministers instead.
You describe in your statement a view that these meetings were not optimally effective. Can you expand on that?
My observation is that the COBRA meetings were very large, so lots of people, which often makes it hard to have very substantial discussions. Sometimes the seniority of representation ministerially at the COBRAs varied between departments. So it wasn't always the case that a minister necessarily had the full authority of their department when a discussion was taking place, was my observation.
There's a particular point you make, which we can see in this paragraph on the screen, Lord Stevens, which is that when as we know they were in the early stage, the COBRA meetings were chaired by Matt Hancock. Other secretaries of state sometimes avoided attending and sent junior ministers instead. Was that a reflection you had at the time?
I'm not saying that was cause and effect, but that is the fact of the matter.
Some of the evidence that's been put to Lord Stevens as well from some of the WhatsApps, Dominic Cummings virtually obsessed with trying to sack Sir Simon Stevens from his job. He viewed him as a roadblock. You'll hear now Andrew O'Connor, who we heard then, the counsel to the inquiry, reading out some of those messages.
Mr. Hancock in particular, but others were encouraging you to resign or otherwise remove you from office during the period of the pandemic. I'll take you to some documents, but were they or not?
No. Not to my face, anyway.
Let's just look at a couple of WhatsApp messages, if we may. These messages are from very early in the pandemic, but you can see January 2020. Dominic Cummings is texting to the owner of the cell phone, who is Mr. Hancock, saying, "Where are we with SS, Simon Stevens?" He says, "It's in train. I'm first getting Ara Darzi to persuade him it's in his best interest to go now. If that doesn't work, I'll move directly." 10 days or so later, the 3rd of February, Dominic Cummings says, "When SS off?" Matt Hancock says, "Short answer is his initial proposal is to announce in September and go at Christmas. I haven't yet engaged. How hard to push for sooner?" Dominic Cummings says, "We must get on with it now. Announced next week as part of reshuffle frenzy, and then it will all get lost in that." So at least on the basis of these messages, first of all, there certainly do seem to have been discussions between Mr. Hancock and Mr. Cummings about you leaving, and it does appear that Mr. Hancock had had some discussions with you about that.
In response to those, Lord Darzi has said on the record that is not correct, and I think his actual word were that is misinformation. So he did not seek to persuade me.
He was also reminded...
Hang on, Henry. Is he accusing Hancock of lying then? Or is Hancock looking like he told Dominic Cummings things that weren't true? What's happening there exactly?
So, yeah, it looks very much at the moment like Matt Hancock was sort of promising Dominic Cummings that he would speak to Simon Stevens and get him to resign, but the general sense that Simon Stevens wanted to resign a few years ago and stayed on, and so I think Matt Hancock was sort of hedging his bets based on what we know so far that he would go at some point. But it doesn't look clear. I mean, in terms of what you asked bluntly, yes, it does look like Matt Hancock didn't speak to Simon Stevens. And then also, James, he was reminded of some of Dominic Cummings' evidence earlier in the week, again playing into that narrative that they were desperate to get rid of him.
Leaving Hancock in post is a big mistake. He's a proven liar who nobody believes or should believe on anything, and we face going into an autumn crisis with him in charge of the NHS still. Therefore, we'll be back around that cabinet table with him and Stevens again in September. Hideous prospect. Did you have the impression that Dominic Cummings or Boris Johnson was dissatisfied with the way that you were running the NHS, or?
Well, by the standard of Dominic Cummings' adjectives, that's one of his gentler epithets. Look, what I would say is I did have a discussion with the Prime Minister in the summer of 2020 about whether or not I would be able to be released from active duty in the NHS.
It also got rather awkward, James, as well, when he was asked if he felt Matt Hancock was truthful.
The inquiry has heard evidence that other people working with Mr. Hancock found him someone who was untruthful. Was that your experience or not?
There were occasional moments of tension and flashpoints, which is probably inevitable during the course of a 15-month plus pandemic. But look, I was brought up always to look for the best in people.
I'm sorry, Mr. Stevens, that's not an answer to my question.
So was I, actually, Henry.
Yes, well, me too. And then later on, James, I think this is perhaps the biggest bombshell we've had so far, and something that's very serious, is Lord Stevens claims that Matt Hancock wanted to decide, rather than the medical professionals, who should live and who should die if it were to come to choosing.
An unresolved but fundamental ethical debate about a scenario in which a rising number of COVID patients overwhelmed the ability of hospitals to look after them and other non-COVID patients. The Secretary of State, that's Mr. Hancock, took the position that in this situation, he, rather than, say, the medical profession or the public, should ultimately decide who should live and who should die. Did you have a view as to whether that was an appropriate line for him to take?
I certainly wanted to discourage the idea that an individual Secretary of State, other than in the most exceptional circumstances, should be deciding how care would be provided. I felt that we are well served by the medical profession in consultation with patients.
So Lord Stevens still giving evidence, James, but as you referenced, some strong words and perhaps more in what he didn't say in regards to Matt Hancock.
Unbelievable. When's Matt Hancock giving evidence?
We suspect sometime in December. It should be along the same time as Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson.
So it's all to play for. On a much less sinister note, why is everyone talking about cricket?
Oh, yeah. Well, this was something which Helen McNamara referenced in her witness statement when, after she had spoken with Matt Hancock, she asked something along the lines of, how are you coping, or are you okay? And then he said he sort of stood in a batting position and proceeded to imitate batting balls away and go, oh, it's fine, I bat them all away.
Well, while miming the act of batting?
While miming the act of sort of hitting them to either side.
Okay. Did you watch The Office? With Rick
yeah, I prefer the US one, but I have watched The Office.
I do. I know what you mean. Sounds sort of very Brentish, that behaviour, doesn't it?
Very.
Thank you, Henry Riley. It is 1 minute after 12. It's also Thursday, which means after the very latest news headlines, it's Mystery Hour.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Mystery Hour with James O'Brien.
And it is 5 minutes after 12. Your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere on your radio dial is upon us already. And as has often been the case in recent months, it's particularly welcome, isn't it? The idea of an hour of light relief. If you're not familiar with this feature, then I think you're in for a rather pleasant surprise. If you are familiar with this feature, then you know exactly what to expect. All I would remind you of is this. The best contribution to Mystery Hour this week wins a Mystery Hour board game. And with Christmas approaching ever quicker, the idea of having that under your tree this year as a gift essentially to yourself should be almost irresistible. Of course, you can buy your own copy at mysteryhour.co.uk, and the full terms and conditions for the competition are available at lbc.co.uk. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need if you have a question that needs asking, or indeed if somebody else asks a question to which you happen to know the answer. There's no real criteria on this. But when people are new to it, they're always slightly surprising when, or rather surprised when they realise the full range of questions. You can ask something completely ridiculous or something really very serious, something that deserves or demands really high levels of quite specialist knowledge, or something that you might be able to answer simply because you were watching telly last night and it popped up. But enough, really. We'll just crack straight on and you can find out for yourself in the most obvious and easy of ways. I've got a sort of weird sense that I've forgotten something, but Keith's not twittering in my ear, so I'm fairly confident that we've covered most of the bases. And we'll crack on. The proof of the pudding, as ever, will be in the eating. 7 minutes after 12. Let Mystery Hour commence. Tom is in Preston. Tom, question or answer?
Good afternoon, James, and question, please.
Yes.
Right. Not on the radio. It just sounds weird. Right. So my question is, when you make a cup of tea or a coffee, why can you taste the difference when you've boiled the kettle for a second time? Now, I can slightly taste it. Some of my friends can taste it, and then other friends can't taste the difference. But I'm also the sort of person that can't tell the difference between diet and full-fat fizzy pop.
Can you not really? God,
yeah,
crikey.
no.
It's like it gives you a weird coating on your tongue, I find, the diet stuff. So you boil the kettle, you make a cup of tea, you have a cup of tea, and then you boil the kettle again and have a second cup of tea, and it will taste to some people noticeably different. Maybe it doesn't actually sound that unlikely, does it? Because
something happens that first time when you boil. Something happens to the water, and it's been discussed at work a few times and things like that. And I thought, you know what, I know someone that will know, or know someone that does know.
I'll know. I probably know a man who knows, but I don't know myself. But it's something to do with the change. Would there be a chemical change? Because it's distilled, isn't it? It's boiled, it's distilled. Is it going to be softer? It's got rid of some impurity. Something's. I don't know. We shall find out.
Fat water.
With coffee, it'd be less. Well, I don't know. We'll find out. I had I won't bore you with the details of my beverage schedule. Thank you, Tom. Why does boiled water taste different? Well, twice boiled water tastes different from once boiled water. John's in Birmingham. John, question or answer?
It's a question, James.
Carry on, John.
Where have all the kippers gone?
I think they've joined the new party, haven't they?
I'm talking real kippers. I'm talking herrings that have been smoked, usually caught in the North Sea, and available in supermarkets across this great country. But somehow, over the last 18 months or so, I've noticed a significant drop in availability, to the point where only about 25% of 25% of the supermarkets I visit sometimes stock them, 75% don't. And bearing in mind that the government are currently saying, and have done for some time, that oily fish is part of a healthy diet and should be consumed twice a week, which I think it's a question which might raise a smile,
it's a mystery.
It's significant to the health of the nation.
It has serious repercussions.
Absolutely.
When you encounter a supermarket that has no kippers, are they temporarily out of stock, or are they no longer on sale?
I inquired at a middle-range supermarket just last week.
So it's like a Sainsbury's, is that middle range? You mean not like a Waitrose, but not like a Lidl?
You're right, it was that very store.
Look at that.
And the manager, the senior manager, said, I'll have a look on the system. And he took out a handheld computer and he said, out of stock at suppliers.
Oh, well, this is quite interesting, isn't it? And you think it's been going on for as long as 18 months? Has it gone off a cliff, or has there been a slow decline? Did we go from 100% to 25%, or did we go to 100 to 90 to 80 to 70 and so on?
it's been gradual but worrying.
Possibly people don't want kippers. I mean, but then no.
God forbid.
I'm quite partial to an Arbroath smoky myself. I like oily fish. I like mackerel, but I don't know that I'm a kipper. So it's usually for breakfast, isn't it? A kipper.
I often have them for an evening meal, and I have them with lava bread made from seaweed from South Wales.
I like
that. It's a wonderful combination of.
I couldn't believe that actually.
Omega-3 and iron. It's so good for one.
And are you still getting kippers? I mean, are you getting enough? Even though it's harder to catch them, find them.
I'm having to travel up to Sutton. I'm having to go to Sutton Coldfield, for heaven's sake.
Good God, John.
And I live in Birmingham.
Good God. I mean, Sutton Coldfield for your kippers.
Yes.
This is absolutely, this is stuff of nightmares.
It's a 10-mile return journey.
I know it is.
It's
just for
ecologically
kippers.
unsound.
Well, it is. Well, we will find out. Possibly there are shortages in the North Sea. Who knows? John, I'm absolutely intrigued now by this. I hope your numbers are correct, but we shall, many people, including David in Edinburgh, pointing out it does sound indeed as if there is something fishy going on. Thank you, John. And thank you, David. Ed's in Watford. Ed, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's a question.
Go on.
This is either really stupid or quite thought-provoking. I can't really decide. So,
welcome to my world.
If I put the corner of a sponge into water, the water goes up into the sponge, so the sponge absorbs it. But that seems to be defying the laws of gravity.
Oh, not really. Gravity's nowhere near as strong as you think it is.
But water's going up, and nothing's sucking it up, and nothing's pushing it up.
Well, it is. It's being absorbed. I think the process of absorption is akin to sucking.
Is it? Is the sponge? There's no action. The sponge isn't sucking the water up. If you put a sponge in water, then it gets absorbed. But if you just put the tip of the sponge in, the water goes up.
Yeah, but it's being sucked up.
By what?
By the sponge. By the absorptive qualities of the sponge.
Yeah, I'm not convinced. I can't figure out.
What do you think it is? Magic?
Well, that's why I said it might be stupid. I don't know, but it's definitely there's nothing. It's not like a syringe where you're sucking it up. It's just going up into the sponge. Nothing.
Yeah, but a syringe is using that's kinetic energy. So no, I lost it there, didn't I? I was doing quite well, but then I reached for too clever a sounding theory there, because what kind of energy is drawing the water up in the sponge?
I mean, I can see if you squeeze the sponge and put it in and then unsqueeze the sponge, then of course it's going to suck in. But just put the tip of a sponge or a sugar cube even
or a biscuit. Or a biscuit, Ed.
Yeah, and it all goes up. So I can't figure that out.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I whatever the answer is, it's not a stupid question.
I'll take that.
Hey, wow, it's all I've got. Thank you, Ed. Why? Yeah, okay, I do get that. I don't think it's a gravitational conundrum, but it is a physically interesting question. How come water goes upwards when you are dunking a biscuit or dipping a sponge or indeed sort of, moistening a sugar cube? Mark is in Hatfield. Mark, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's a question, please.
Carry on.
I was listening to Brian Cox the other day talking about the origins of the universe and the elements and how they were formed, and I wondered whether there were any other chemical elements in the universe that we don't have on our planet.
You mean an element that's been discovered but doesn't naturally occur on Earth?
Yes.
Well, I mean, really, I suppose that Brian Cox would be the man to ask.
He doesn't do a phone, and he just talks at you.
He does everything else. He's got every other angle of this business covered. It won't be long before he gets himself a phone. It'd be great. He could come in here. We could do a special mystery hour with Brian, couldn't we? And he could come in and take solely astronomical or physics questions. So would we not know? And you get new elements added, don't you? At times, but they're discovered in nature, I think, rather than. Where have we been? Well, we've been to the moon, haven't we?
Yes.
And we've been to Mars. So, but wouldn't they have announced it? Don't you think that'd have been quite a big story?
Probably, but
you don't know for sure, and nor do I.
Don't know for sure. No.
No, you're on. I like it. It's a good question. Thank you. Cheers, Mark. Have we discovered any elements while exploring space that do not appear on Earth? You'd be a bit worried, I think, wouldn't you? Because it'd be like a science fiction film. There's someone where you get an astronaut in space going, "I've discovered a new element," and everyone on Earth goes, "Yay, bring it back quick! We can build amazing things with it. We've never seen an element like this before." And then it'd end up being like Terminator 2. And we wouldn't be able to control the technology, which kind of takes us back to the conversation we were having in the last hour. It's 12:15.
Mystery Hour with James O'Brien. This is LBC.
It's 19 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where Mystery Hour continues. Questions in need of answers include, where have all the kippers gone? How can a sponge make water go uphill, as it were? When you boil water, and in fact, a couple of you have pointed out that when you're making a baby's bottle with formula, you're told not to use twice boiled water, I think. So there is obviously some chemical change underway. I imagine it's got something to do with oxygen, but we'll let someone cleverer than me answer that question. And similarly, I imagine there isn't an element that's been discovered in space but doesn't naturally occur on Earth. But we need a definitive answer to that question, either in the affirmative or indeed in the negative. Dennis is in Watford. Dennis, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
The action of water moving up in a sponge is capillary action, and it's the intermolecular forces between the surface of the sponge and the liquid, and they overcome gravity, and thus the water moves upwards.
The capillary action. Can you explain how it works?
Well, it's there are forces between the liquid and the sponge surface, and those forces overcome gravity, and thus the liquid moves upwards against the forces of gravity.
The forces moves. What forces are they? Do you know?
There are intermolecular forces.
Are you laughing at me, Dennis?
Well, sorry, I don't know quite what more to say.
No, but I mean, what are you, PhD?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I got an E at O level, all right, in physics.
That's all right. Well,
so be gentle with me, but I thought you might say it's potential or kinetic. Do you see what sort of energy is it? Or is that a really stupid thing to say?
It's neither, really. It's the forces that are interacting between the molecules in the sponge and the molecules in the water, and they actually overcome the forces of gravity.
So there's more energy in the molecular interaction than there is being exerted by.
If there wasn't more energy, then it would stay where it was. But because they're stronger, more forceful than that of gravity, then the water moves upwards.
Qualifications?
Well, just I'm a PhD in physics, I suppose. So I understand a little bit about the nature of matter.
Oh, I wish I did, Dennis.
I'm sure you understand a lot more about things than I do. So everybody has their...
Well, horses for courses, eh?
Exactly.
A round of applause for Dennis, please. Very nicely played. Luke is in Waterloo. Luke, question or answer?
I've got a question, please.
Carry on.
You know how most plants have got green leaves?
Yeah, I do know. You're definitely right.
What's the deal with plants that have got sort of reddish or purple leaves?
What do you mean, what's the deal?
Well, I always thought that plants had green leaves because of chlorophyll, which is the chemical that lets them photosynthesize. That's what I remember from high school science, anyway.
It is.
So the reddish or purple ones, do they just not have chlorophyll? I mean, they must photosynthesize, right?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I'm not really in my comfort zone. I got a B in biology, actually, which is better than an E in physics, but I'm still not exactly feeling confident about even responding to your question with a theory or an answer. I mean, does chlorophyll have to be green?
I mean, I thought it was. I mean, if you can get purple chlorophyll, then that's just, I mean, that's it then, but that seems unlikely.
Why?
I don't know. The chemicals come in more than one. I feel silly even saying that.
No, I don't feel silly. So why are some leaves not green? Really, is the question.
Yeah.
When they're still fresh. I mean, because they go brown and die in autumn, but they're not.
Yeah.
That's not relevant.
Yeah, I always thought that the green. I remember something vaguely about the green being the best wavelength for taking in light for photosynthesis.
Yeah,
but,
no, you're right. You're right. You're right. And some leaves are exclusively red?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no plant expert, as you can probably tell, but
But that's an interesting question. I'd never really thought of it. That probably has got a fairly obvious and simple answer. But if neither of us know it, then it counts as a question, doesn't it?
Yeah, I imagine there are loads of people who are, know lots about plants who could answer it.
Not even sure how much you'd need to know. All you need to know, Luke, is more than you and me, which is quite possibly very little. Still very little.
Right.
Let's find out.
I'm optimistic about an answer then, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's the hope that gets you. 24 minutes after 12 is the time. Why are some leaves not green? It's a fairly straightforward question. Bob's in Ilford. Bob, question or answer?
Question.
Carry on.
Hi. I've got a biology question as well. My one is I was listening to a biologist on a podcast recently, and he said that the hormone we release when we're stressed is exactly the same chemical compound as those that would have been released by the dinosaurs when they were under threat, or any of the earliest ancestors.
Can you remember?
What's the biologist, did you say? Or the hormone? The hormone. He didn't say, but I think he was talking about cortisol.
Yeah, I do too.
But my question is, how would we know? I get we've got fossil records. How would we know that compound was exactly the same? He's saying it's an identical chemical match.
Oh, I don't. I'm getting worried now. I don't want Mystery Hour to evolve into like a police force for podcasts.
So, I'm just interested.
I know, but we've had a Brian Cox. We've had a Brian Cox question now, and we've had your question is like. I mean, really, as a producer of a very popular podcast, if you come away with questions that haven't been answered within the podcast, then the podcast in many ways has failed.
Well,
I would argue
it was very good, as yours is as well.
Well, it wasn't. It clearly wasn't very good because it made a sweeping statement without any explanation or justification.
Well, maybe I should have known. I don't know.
No,
but it was
how would you know?
Anyway,
yeah, because what would they have studied or discovered to identify what hormones there were? You definitely heard it correctly.
I'm pretty sure. Yes, I did. Yeah,
because there'd be trouble if you didn't.
Get fossil records. We have those, but how do we know what chemicals they were producing
in their system?
Yeah.
All right. I quite like that. That's a nice question, Bob. You're on.
I've got a maybe possible answer to the chlorophyll.
No. Doesn't work like that, mate. Sorry.
Right, all right. Thanks a lot.
All got to be produced. All got to be very, very carefully calibrated. Otherwise, we get into trouble with the International Quiz Foundation, the IQF. They're really, really strict about that kind of thing. Thank you, Bob. Dan's in Deanshanger in Northamptonshire. Dan, question or answer?
Afternoon, James. It's an answer.
Carry on, mate.
It's regarding the kettle water tasting different after it's been boiled a couple of times. I mean, you kind of touched upon it already about saying when it's boiled, there's oxygen bubbles that are being released. So that is part of the reason why water might taste a bit flatter.
Yeah.
But it's also, if you can imagine, when it's been boiled, you're evaporating water, so some of the chemicals are being further concentrated in the water. So you're getting metallic and other chemical tastes in that water the more you boil it.
Yes, of course you are. Because there's less left. So if you filled up the kettle again, and that makes perfect sense. What are your qualifications for this one then?
I'm not qualified at all.
That's all right.
But in family, I've got a member who owns and runs a company that actually came up with some of the patents that we use in our kettles around the world.
Really?
The elements. Yeah.
How old is he or she?
Approaching 60, probably around 60 now. He himself didn't invent it. He just owns the company now that sort of acquired it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And
it's come up in conversation?
I'd be surprised with engineers what they talk about.
I can believe it. And so
I wasn't asleep during that one.
And so that it might be that a tiny baby would have it would be the concentration element rather than the reduction in oxygen element that might render
100%.
the formula milk slightly dodge.
Yeah, I mean it's actually a good thing the first time round because you're killing off some of the bacteria on the first boil, so that's good. But yeah, in the water, it surprisingly depends where in the UK you are. There's more levels of fluoride in certain areas, more deprived areas that they put into the water. So these things are more concentrated.
That's a really good answer, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a round of applause.
Thank you very much.
That's an absolutely excellent answer from what I wasn't sure at the outset was a particularly good question, but that's often the way, isn't it? It takes a quality of an answer to establish what the quality of a question was. Ooh, bit of philosophy for you there. So you don't appreciate the quality of a question until you hear the answer sometimes, and that's a very good example of that. So questions that still need answers. I'm very worried about John's kippers, but we're now a lot clearer on sponges and boiled water. Are there any new elements that have been discovered via space exploration? Why are some leaves not green? Think of it's not. We're not getting leaves and flowers mixed up. Whoever sent that question in. Some plants have like red leaves or purple leaves. A lot of people unimpressed by my stupidity on the capillary effect. So surface tension is the best way to understand it. You've even got a meniscus on a glass of water or a glass of wine. So I do understand it, but I'm not pretending to be stupid. I am very stupid when it comes to physics. It's just one of those languages I don't speak. And Bob's question, of course, just from a moment ago. 12:30 is the time, and here are the very latest news headlines with Amelia Cox.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien. Call 0345 6060 973.
I am, with the greatest of love and respect to Bob, I am, and indeed to my esteemed colleagues who put him through, I am going to be a little bit dismissive of questions asking me or my Mystery Hour to clarify things you've heard in podcasts. I think I am, because only you heard it. So it's not. Well, anyway, it's on the list, Bob. No harm done, but I don't want to set a precedent. So where have all the kippers gone? A marked shortage, a disappearance of kippers from the shelves of many supermarkets. As often happens when a question like that appears, there's no point telling me that you've got some kippers. No one is claiming that kippers have been eradicated or have disappeared completely, but there is clearly a problem with kipper supply. And that is why the question stands, even though you bought some kippers from your local Morrison's last night. That is not pertinent to the broader question. So where have all the kippers gone? Are there any new elements? Why are some leaves not green when chlorophyll is, we think? And how come some bloke on a podcast claimed to know what sort of hormones dinosaurs have when me and Bob can't think of any way in which you'd be able to establish what sort of hormones dinosaurs had? Naomi's in South Norwood. Naomi, question or answer?
Hi, James. I think I have 1.5 answers. I mean, in light of your earlier conversation, and as a woman, I'm going to try and squeeze in an extra bit.
No, don't. You can't do that. And don't try and bring misogyny into it. I've already told a bloke he can't do it.
Well, I think I might be able to add a little bit to the answer that you got before.
Oh, that's fine. No, you can do that.
Question. But I'm going to answer the question regarding the chlorophyll in leaves.
Thank you.
All leaves will have a range of different pigments. They'll contain a range of different pigments. But normally chlorophyll is the most dominant, and so that's what you see. And it's quite bright green. There are actually two different chlorophylls, as far as I know, chlorophyll A and B. They both absorb slightly different wavelengths of light, and that's just to ensure the plant is able to maximise the amount of light it can take in. In the autumn, what happens is that the chlorophyll's broken down, and that just normally masks all the other colours. So I couldn't remember the names of them. I'm not a botanist, but they're carotenoids and xanthophyll. There's sort of other pigments that are then you can see them when that chlorophyll's been broken down.
Yes.
And the reason they just plants just continually are resynthesizing the chlorophyll because bright light actually damages it, so it kind of tends to break down over the summer. So it then breaks down in winter, and then it's resynthesized again. So it's kind of ready to just sort of be there.
But some plants are always red, aren't they? They always have red.
Yeah, so exactly. So some will just have. I mean, just there's variation, right? In all.
And will that be to do with their origins? Then that they thrived originally in places where the light worked.
Exactly, because you're going to have shade tolerant and shade tolerant lights. Shade tolerant plants, which might have a slightly different, makeup of pigments. but all leaves will have some photosynthesis. Photosynthesizing.
So it's not really a mystery, but it is an interesting question.
So.
No,
I think it's interesting. And,
yeah, I do as well.
Yeah.
Qualifications?
Yeah. I'm a biology teacher.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
What was the other thing you wanted to do?
So with the sponge, your caller did mention. He mentioned
capillary
I think
action.
He spoke about he said capillary action, which is basically what it is. He talked about the cohesive properties, he talked about the adhesive properties of the water molecules sticking to the sponge.
Yeah.
But it's actually, he forgot to talk about the cohesion between the water molecules, because that would explain one water molecule moving into a hole, one of the pores in the sponge. But actually, the point is that with water, it's what we call sticky, in that it pulls other molecules with it.
Yeah, like a chain.
So it's exactly the same reason why, trees are able to overcome really, a massive feat really in taking water from the ground all the way up to the top of the actual,
Oh, that's why everyone thought I was stupid.
Yeah, so it's transpiration stream basically, GCSE.
Because of trees.
Biology. Yeah.
So in fact,
exactly
it was
the
a
same.
fairly blooming Luke. No, not Luke. It was Ed.
But again, I think it's an interesting one, because if you haven't got,
but if we thought about trees, if I'd said to him, "Oh, you mean like a tree?"
Well, trees do it exactly. Yeah.
So
when
then
you
it
were
would
saying
have.
I was saying trees. I was waiting for you to say.
Well, I missed the trick there, Naomi, and I apologise. I feel I let you down. I let Mystery Hour down, but most of all, I let myself down.
I'm so happy. I think that's the first time I've called Mystery Hour, so I'm so happy I got through. So.
Well, so am I now. And you get, I suppose you get 1.5 rounds of applause. Let's see if Keith can rise to that challenge.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. You've made my half-term week.
Well, enjoy your rest. You deserve it, clearly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. In fact, you shouldn't be ringing in on biological questions when you're off on your half-term holiday. It's coming. Oh, hang on. Sorry. Thank you. It's coming up to 20 to 1. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Carl's in Prescott. Carl, question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on, Carl.
Right. I've always been told that dogs age 7 years to 1 human year.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, A, how do people know? And B, is it the same for every breed of dog? Is it actually a fact or not?
Well, I mean, it's not a hard and fast scientific rule, is it?
I don't know. It's probably based on something.
I mean, I think it varies a bit with size. It's not necessarily 7. It varies a little bit with size. I think it's fairly obvious, don't you?
Is it? No, I thought it was because you sleep a lot, and when they wake up, is that the same as us having a day? You wake up and you go to bed, that's one day. I thought it was based on that.
Blimey.
But then everybody says, dogs are 7 to 1, but based on what? There's got to be a fact, or just a rumour.
Yeah, no, based on, watching a lot of people die and a lot of dogs die, and dividing the years that the dogs had lived by the years that the humans had lived, coming up with a rough average, doing a simple division, and realising that the full extent of a dog's life is about a seventh of a human life. Well, not a seventh of a human life, but if the average human age is 80, then let's say 70 because that makes it easier. Then the dog in human years, would be in human years would be 10. So if they've just done it on averages, surely. I can't think of any other way of doing it, short of chopping a dog's leg off and counting the rings.
I thought it was DNA based or something, but then that seems really far.
It might be. Yeah, I mean, as I've established with almost every call this week, these are not my disciplines that I'm comfortable in. But I do know that the bigger the dog, the shorter the life. So the 7 years is itself an average. But
right, okay.
But I can't see how else it would have been done, but than by taking a mean of human lives and a mean of dog lives and dividing the first by the second.
Right, okay.
Someone will know. I'll put it on the list, Carlo, because there's no earthly way you're going to accept that as a definitive answer. But I'd be surprised. I will be surprised if that's not it.
Yeah.
All right.
Strange one, isn't it?
It is a strange one. I know. I like it. Thank you, mate. Bernie's in Thorpe Bay in Essex. Bernie, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on, Bernie.
Right. I was playing a card game with one of my granddaughters, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
So I got a pack of 52 cards, well shuffled, yeah?
Yeah.
7 cards dealt each.
Yeah.
I looked at my 7 cards, and every card was black.
All 7 of them?
All 7 of them. And then I said to Enid, look at this.
Yeah.
I've got all black cards, right?
Yeah.
And Enid said, look at mine, Grandad, they're all red.
Well.
So the question is, what are the odds of 14 cards being dealt from a pack of 52, with 7 being red and 7 being black?
I don't know whether I've got a sore head this week, but are you sure that's a mystery hour question?
Well, it is, because
it's a
I
mystery.
wanted to know one, I wanted to know if it's possible to work it out.
It is possible to work it out.
I wanted to know what the odds were. Because,
well, you've got 26 red cards and 26 black cards in the pack, right?
Yeah.
So
but it's the pack is shuffled, right? And then you've got an alternate dealing. Like, yeah. And I spoke to my son-in-law, and he reckons it's something like perhaps 16,500 to 1. But
Where'd he get
I'm
that
sure
from?
It's got to be more than that.
Where'd he get that from?
Sorry?
Where did he get that figure from?
He worked it out mathematically, he said.
All right. And is he a reliable character, Bernie, normally?
Son-in-law has got a PhD in, I think it's astronomical particle physics, and my daughter's got a PhD in astronomical wave physics or something like that.
Is that how they met?
Sorry?
Is that how they met?
Yeah, they met at university, yeah.
Flipping out. So, I'm very flattered that you're asking me.
I'm asking a member of the public, James. You only write words. You don't deal in numbers, do you?
You're not wrong there. But I think if he was my son-in-law with those qualifications, I think I probably would have left it there, Bernie.
Oh, no, I can't. I've got to get a second opinion.
So, So you've got 52 cards, well shuffled. You deal 7, 2 lots of 7, and the first lot's all black and the second lot's all red. What are the odds?
Yeah.
All right.
I couldn't believe it. And what I did, I showed my wife. Yeah. I don't think she could believe it. And then I thought, I'll take a photograph and I'll bounce it around the family and see what they say. Not much reaction, really, to be honest.
God, the bloody ingrates. Seriously. Cheers, Bernie. I like that question a lot. What are the odds? What are the odds? Seriously. I've just remembered something from childhood that I can't. So I played Patience once and kept the pack, and Mum was playing bridge with a friend, and she must have shuffled the pack really badly, and she ended up with, an astonishing bridge hand. But it was because I had left the Patience pack in the box, in her bridge box, and she was so excited that she had Ace, King, Queen, Jack, 10, 9, 8, and it was all my fault, and I couldn't tell her. She was so excited about the fact that she'd got this astonishing bridge hand. Randomly, she thought, but in fact, the pack had been separated into all 4 suits shortly before it was loosely shuffled. Anyway, I digress slightly. Let's get Bernie an answer. It's 12:46.
Mystery Hour on LBC with James O'Brien.
It is 12:49. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where questions that still need answers. We've got no news on kippers. There must be some people listening. John said that Bernie, who rang him with the playing card question, should have phoned Carol Waterman last week. Yeah, you're not wrong, actually. And I think that Bernie might be owing his son-in-law a mild apology there for do you have to apologise for seeking a second opinion? I don't know, but someone must know why there seem to be supply issues with kippers, and it can't be Brexit because we would catch, or can it? Maybe they were caught by foreign fleets, and they're of course now subject to import checks or whatever you remember that we were going to free ourselves up by introducing loads more red tape, the sort of Jacob Rees-Mogg school of logic. Maybe there is a Brexity answer to it, but I kind of hope not. Any new elements? You are allowed to ring in and say no, but you do need the qualifications. You do need the qualifications to say no. We definitely haven't discovered any new elements through space exploration. How on earth would a biologist be able to claim that we know the makeup of a dinosaur's hormones? What would they have found that would allow them to do that? How do they calculate dog years, as in the comparison to human years? And Bernie's question about cards. There's quite a lot to get through, and it's 10-1 already. Marcus is in Westminster. Marcus, question or answer?
Answer.
Carry on.
Yeah, the answer to have any elements been discovered in space is no. But, incredibly, the second most common element in the universe, helium, was discovered on the Sun before it was discovered on the Earth. And it was actually discovered from a back garden in Wimbledon in about 1860.
How?
There was a total eclipse of the Sun, and when you do that, you can actually see the cool outer atmosphere of the Sun. And it was possible to spot helium because every single element, and there are 92 naturally occurring elements from hydrogen the lightest to uranium the heaviest, each of them generates light at particular wavelengths. It's rather like a fingerprint. I mean, we all know that sodium, for instance, in sodium lights in our streets is yellow, and that there's characteristic light from every element, so it was discovered. I mean, the incredible thing about helium is the person who discovered that it was the second most common element is a woman called Cecilia Payne, and everybody has forgotten her name. She wrote the most important astrophysics PhD of the 20th century, and nobody knows her name. And I actually wrote an article about her in New Scientist, trying to get her the credit that she deserved. And when the magazine was printed, I turned to the page, and they'd only printed the corner of her hat. There'd been a cock up at the printer. So Cecilia Payne, an English woman in the 1920s, was the first person who discovered what most of the universe is made of, which is hydrogen and helium.
Good grief. And do you think that oversight is partly down to the conversation we were having in the first hour? It is a sort of low-level misogyny, like a touch of the Ada Lovelaces, perhaps?
Definitely. She was English. She was at Cambridge. You couldn't do a PhD at Cambridge, so she went to Harvard, where she was paid on equipment expenses, and she worked for a very famous American astronomer called Henry Norris Russell, and he made her say in her PhD, "I'm almost certainly incorrect." 10 years later, when it was discovered that, in fact, helium and hydrogen make up 98% of the universe, he wrote a paper, and I think he mentioned her as a footnote on about page 157.
Cheeky beggar.
And I've tried repeatedly to get Cecilia Payne the credit that she deserves. I've even got interviewed at the Cheltenham Literature Festival about this because I'm a writer. And
I know you are, Marcus.
Beforehand, the interviewer said to me, at the end, "I'll ask you about anyone who didn't get the credit that they deserve." And I thought, I'm going to get credit for Cecilia Payne. Yeah. Got to the end, he said, "Applause for Marcus," and that was the end. So I think she's fated never to get the credit that she deserves.
Why don't you write her? Well, you're not really a biographer, are you? Because you could do her biography. Someone should do her biography. That would probably be the best way.
I know somebody who talked to her daughter who lives in America and was interested in doing that. So there's just all these people. I mean, the woman who co-discovered black holes, Louise Webster, nobody knows her name. She's an Australian. She died at 49. She was the first person to have a liver transplant in Australia. And there have been Nobel Prizes for black holes, and nobody remembers Louise Webster.
No one ever remembers her name.
Lots of these women get forgotten or written out of history.
Which is very timely to the conversation that Sheila's going to have after this and that we had in the first hour. Shall I tell everyone what your qualifications are?
You can if you like.
You are Marcus Chown. author of The Ascent of Gravity and The One Thing You Need to Know, and myriad other science books.
I am, yeah.
Round of applause. What are you working on at the moment?
I've just written a book about black holes, actually, which will come out in June. It's called A Crack in Everything. So
it's a good title.
It is a good title. I stole it from Leonard Cohen.
Yes, I thought you did. There is a crack in everything. It's how the light gets in, is it? No.
That's right.
Yes,
that's the line, which I thought was very poetic.
It's a beautiful... Well, he is a poet, isn't he, Leonard
People write books on black holes tend to call their book Black Holes, so I thought I'd
love it.
Try with something else.
Have a round of... I hate people who plug their books on this show, Marcus. It's such cheeky behaviour. Have a round of applause on me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe. Lewis is in Hurley. Lewis, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on.
Dinosaurs.
Yes. How do they know?
So basically, cortisol is part of a group of hormones called glucocorticoids, and these are common across all animals, like fish, reptiles, birds, humans, mammals, and obviously animals like fish and sharks predated the dinosaurs, and they have this stress hormone.
So it's just a simple deduction. Yeah. So they must have had these stress hormones.
Well, the odds of them not having it would be astronomically small. Not impossible, but it's basically zero.
Dismissible. Qualifications?
I have a degree in medical genetics.
That'll do. Round of applause for Lewis, please. Helen's in Manchester. Helen, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on.
I have an answer about the dog question. How do they know about dog age equivalent? Okay, if you start off with a dog that's a puppy, if you imagine that's a newborn baby.
Yes.
So you know that that's the equivalent.
Yes.
Usually what happens the first couple of years of a dog's life, it's usually 2 to 2.5 years. That's when they grow to be fully grown in size. They also become usually what they call fully mature. So they've gone from being a puppy to an adolescent dog.
Right.
So that space of time, you can easily tell that that's going from being a newborn to being the human equivalent of a teenager. Make sense so far?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
But how do they translate it into human years is the question.
So that way you know that if it took a dog from 0 to, say, 2.5, they've become, in human years, about 13, 14 years old.
Yeah, there it is.
So you divide one by the other, if that makes sense.
However, yeah, carry on.
Dogs don't actually carry on maturing at the same rate as human beings. It's easy to see because obviously in 2.5 years, a human being doesn't mature to be a teenager, whereas in 2.5 years, a dog matures to that teenage stage.
Yes.
So at that point, your dog's maturity rate starts to slow down a little bit.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then different dogs, different breeds, different sizes, they're going to live to different lengths.
So it's a measurement to full length, really. Is the root of the answer. What are your qualifications?
I run a pet care and dog walking business. I've done various qualifications in dog walking, dog...
That'll do. Have a round of applause. I've got to crack on because I want to squeeze in another before close of play. Thank you, Helen. Steve's in Thurrock. Steve, question or answer?
It's an answer.
Do it really quickly.
Yep. To the 7 black cards, 7 red cards.
Yeah, what's the sum?
Answer is, it's 1 in 14,030.
How did you calculate that?
Well, there's 26 black cards. There's 52 cards in a pack. So 26 divided by 52. You multiply it by 25 black cards left. So there's 51 cards. So and so on and so forth. And then when you get down to the red cards, you go back up to there's a 26 divided by 45 cards left in the pack. Go right the way down. And you end up with 14,030.558.
Is that about 0.007?
0.007.
Yeah. 0.007. Qualifications?
One of the few things that I remember from my A-level statistics.
That's another E for me, actually. Well, have a round of applause. I've no idea whether you're right or wrong, mate. You lost me pretty much from the start, which is not a criticism of you. I'm just a bit tired and rubbish at maths. Thank you. The reason I'm tired is I was on stage last night, and I'm on stage again tonight in Southampton. A few people asking if it's still going ahead, given the state of the weather, but it is. As we know, as far as we know, it is all going ahead. But if you can't make it, there is a facility on the website to return your tickets and then because it's all sold out, like all the gigs for the new book. And then someone who can come could buy them. I'm going to give the board game to John because he didn't get an answer about his kippers, and I feel he's suffered enough. So the Mystery Hour board game is on its way to John. You can get your own, of course, at mysteryhour.co.uk. And the new book, which I have mentioned quite a lot, but oddly not this week, How They Broke Britain, is something of which I'm incredibly proud, not least because it's dedicated to my late father, is published today and available in all good bookshops. Thank you to everyone who's already bought it. It's gone one. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player or on the Whole Show podcast, where you'll also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as all of Global's live radio stations. Download Global Player for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick. But now, it's time for Sheila Ferguson. 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 It's time for Sheila Ferguson.